Hello, everyone! Today I want to talk to you about the shadow and some things that we can learn with the shadow. With today's overload of information, it's normal that we try to reduce the amount of information that comes into our eyes and brains and ears. And it can be tempting to oversimplify and overcategorize things into good or bad. I like this. I dislike this. I'm for this. I'm against this. I'm not that person. I would never do that. He is so kind and thoughtful and contributes to all these charities. He would never do ... Or people who vote ... Always ... However, reality is way more complex. And inside of each one of us lives a huge crowd. You heard that. This concept of inner crowd is not new. Back in 1886, Robert Stevenson wrote The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, where he explored the kindness, the good side of Dr. Jekyll and the evil, the shadows, the dark side through Mr. Hyde. Also, the psychologist Carl Jung dedicated his career to shining the light on the shadow. The shadow per se is not evil or bad. Let's look at a lioness, for example, who takes care of her cubs, nourishes them. It's the same lioness that will kill to survive or kill to eat. So if we're thinking of nature, shadow coexists with light, and there's no connotation connected to either of those. Of course, if we're talking about humans, it's different. Let's think of a baby. If a baby is happy, they're going to move their body, they're going to shout, they're going to smile, laugh, giggle. If they're angry or upset, they're going to cry, they're going to bash around, they're going to move their body. If they're curious, they're going to put their finger in the electric socket. As we grow up, and throughout our lives, we learn which actions, decisions are more acceptable, less acceptable. We start to develop an understanding of the implications of each of our decisions and each of our actions. We can see this as a spectrum. On one end, we have the doer. On the other end, we have the overthinker. So, on the doer's end, we've got the baby, excited, curious, no boundaries, no limits, no awareness about the impact of each action on anyone else's lives, on my own life. I'm just curious, right? On the other end, the overthinker, it's that adult who thinks about every possibility. How's it going to impact my life? How's it going to impact your life? How's it going to impact my neighbors? How's it going to impact everything? What are these people going to think about me? What am I going to think about myself? And all this chatter that goes on to a point where the person just freezes because they can't make any decisions. So the magic obviously lies somewhere in between these two ends of the spectrum. In trying to be the best versions of ourselves, it's tempting to shut down the shadows, shut down those darker places that we think, oh, I'm not that person. Well, listen to this. You are that person. Think of one characteristic you would not like to be associated with. You have it in you. To help me explain how we can learn from the shadow, I'm going to bring in an example from Debbie Ford's fabulous book, The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, and I'm going to share an example from my life. So the example from the book is about this guy who was very decisive, he was a bro, and he hated wimps. and also being accused of wimp was a serious trigger. So he did a lot of personal work and was trying to figure out why the idea of being a wimp triggered him so much. Long story short, he remembered an episode where being a wimp had saved his life. So this guy had gone out with a bunch of friends and there was a bit of drinking when somebody decided to go to a different party. So everybody was just going to drive over, but this guy didn't want to go and get into a car with a drunk driver, so he decided not to go and, of course, was called a wimp. You can see where the story's going. There was a bad accident and this guy was lucky because he was not in the car. So he was saved by being a wimp. Of course, I'm not telling you to all go out there and be wimps. What I'm saying is that sometimes that shadow that triggers us has a story to tell and can save us, can help us. The example I want to share from my life is the characteristic bossy or decisive. But the judgmental bit is the bossiness. And sometimes people just needed to be decisive for me to feel a little bit triggered. And at the same time, I hated it if people accused me of being bossy. So I couldn't own that shadow. And it tormented me until I started owning it. There was a time when I had a team leader who was pretty bossy to the point of being a bully. And because I didn't want confrontation, but at the same time I didn't know how to deal with it, I started feeling very disempowered, victimized, and you can see where that goes. So career-wise, I hit a pretty low point in terms of professional confidence. I ended up writing a letter of resignation and was going to hand it in. Luckily, I did not hand it in because I had this great chat with a very good friend. And she reminded me that the school year would soon end and this team leader would leave and that I could have a fresh start. So when the new school year came and the new team leader came, I was able to own the characteristic of bossiness or decisiveness. And thanks to that, I was better able to negotiate with this team leader and with other people. So I've learned that decision making is tough, and sometimes being decisive can make you look bossy. Of course, I do encourage you to put yourself in other people's shoes. I encourage you to be empathetic. I encourage you to listen to other perspectives and then make your decision, right? To end, I want to set a challenge. I'm going to call on Debbie Ford again, and the exercise I'm going to propose is based on page 54. I'm going to invite you to create 2 lists. For a week, I want you to think about the characteristics that really trigger you, really annoy you in other people. And also the characteristics that you do not want people to call you that name. Like, you do not want to be called that thing. So whenever something annoys you or triggers you, just write it down. Write down, was it bullying? Was it bossy? What was it? And the other list is of the things that make you really feel proud or happy, inspired, things you would love people to call you. List those down for a week. Then after a week, I want you to circle 1 word from each list. The word that you feel more strongly about on each list. And here's the exciting thing. You have those 2 characteristics. You might not see how immediately, so keep those lists or keep those words and have a little think about them every now and then. Try to think, when did this characteristic help you or save you or protect you or teach you? And let me know what happens. Thanks for listening. Beijinhos!